Welcome into the Dad Verb podcast. Topics around parenting from the lens of a dad.
We're going to be talking about some awkward questions your kids might toss at you and how we would approach those questions in this episode. Ben hinted at it in the last episode, so we're gonna kind of open up on that in this one. Ben's here, Saunders is here. Let's dive in. Okay, so kids, we're talking like 3 to 6 years in age, right? They get curious about the world. Why is the sky blue? Alexa, why is the sky blue? Answers. Boom. Easy, right? No, but some of the more difficult ones, right? We're gonna ask the questions, and we as dads are gonna like kind of dive in. What were you gonna say, Saunders? What you got?
Best one I've ever heard uttered out of the mouth of a babe. Why does Daddy have a tail?
Awesome.
So to put it in context, it was a 3-year-old little girl. I was in high school at the time, and she was regularly showering with her mother as her bathing thing. Like mom would take her, shower her, and right. Yeah. Well, her dad got done with something. She was a mess, and so they threw her in the shower with dad, and showered, cleaned her up, and done. And then she was standing in the driveway talking. Like we were talking with the parents, and the parents were talking, and she was just there. And she finally looks at the dog, and she goes, "Dogs have tails." Yes, they do. Very good. Why does Daddy have a tail? And we all just died because she like clicked.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. My daughter walked in on me showering a couple weeks back. She walks up to the shower and she just stares at me, and she's staring right at it. She just points and goes, "What's that? What's that?" Yeah. Just like that. That. I'm like,
it's so early on that they notice the differences between like themselves. Like if you have a daughter, they'll notice the difference between your body and their body, and they'll wonder why it's different. Yeah. And you're going to have that conversation much earlier than you want.
Hasn't happened to me yet, but I have a feeling it's on its way.
Because it will.
My only saving grace, she doesn't know how to work a doorknob yet. Once she can work a doorknob, I'm done for, because she already is like, shower with dad? No. Like,
this
is a funny one, right? For all the guff I give people, right? I am like a prude about my kids being me naked, being around my kids. I don't know why, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. They can watch Dexter with me, but they can't be in the room while I'm naked. Like, don't know what that's about. There's something weird in this psycho, but
well, all right. So let's prep the guys out there. Let's prep the dads out there, because the reason why is I saw this video on Instagram, and it was like this dad from New Zealand with just the best accent, and his little kiddo, he's like 4 or 5, asked him, "Where do babies come from?" And for a good 2 minutes, he just couldn't get out anything intelligible. He's just, do you want the truth? Or do you want the truth? All right. So the truth is, and then he just couldn't do it. And it ended with him not actually even giving an explanation. And it's really easy for us to dismiss. Like, one day when you're older, you'll learn, right? But I have here, I guess, a good tip, not from me, but these parenting sources, which I find to be a good one. But I'll toss it to you guys. Ben, I'm your kiddo. I'm 4. I'm 5. Dad, where do babies come from? What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I just had this conversation with my son the other day in the truck, literally on the way to school, 10 minutes from daycare. And he was asking me about his sister and when he became a big brother, and then wanted to know how a baby got in mommy's belly, because he knew that my wife's had 2 C-sections. So he knows we go to the hospital, the baby gets cut out of mommy's belly, and we come home with a sibling. But like, even my wife was like, "How did you explain it?" And I was like, I did the best I could using the least graphic terms possible, but just sort of explain the general premise of like, you have a mom, you have a dad, they get together, they have a relationship, they want to show their love and expand their family, so they have a baby, right? Mm-hmm. And for us, we've always thought it was, my wife is a nurse, so we've always thought it's really important to use like proper terminology for body parts. So whenever we explain anything to our kids having to do with their body, like we use the right terms. So we'll use like penis and vagina. We don't use like, oh, your hoo-ha or your ding-a-ling. Like we don't use any like pejorative or sort of like childish terms. Because, and this is kind of like worst case scenario, right? But we want them to, one, have an understanding of their body, and two, if anything, God forbid, were ever to happen to them, we need them to be able to explain what happened using the right terminology, right? So that extends beyond just the safety aspect and into the explaining bodily functions and why does your body look different than mine, and what's this part and what's that. And like you kind of just, in my mind, you kind of just treat it like any other question, explain it the best you can in terms they'll understand, and then go from there. But I don't think you're going to damage them by answering a question.
No. Saunders, what's your take on this one?
So I actually remember reading this kid's book, and it's called Where Do Babies Come From?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's still available.
By the makers of Everybody Poops.
Is it the same?
Solid one.
Is it still there? Oh, well, so no, I remember reading this book, and it does like a really good job of explaining the act that leads to conception in like the least attractive way possible. Right. And we read it. Like I remember reading it. I think my mother probably still has the book wherever it is. And I think it goes back to the same honesty, like we're going to have the conversation. We're going to read the right things. And I remember,
just looked it up. I remember this book. Now that you said it, I remember this cover. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll look it up.
And I remember reading it. So my parents were like, here's a book, read, kid. And that worked for me for whatever reason. And I think I'm going to try and do the same thing. Like we're going to answer the questions. But going one step beyond that, when I was a teenager, my parents handed me a book called Growing Up Feeling Good About Yourself. And it went into explicit details on like all teenage puberty topics that you could. I mean, it was a novel. Like it was 400 pages, I bet.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And that was an excellent resource for like my teenage years, because not only did I have my parents to have the awkward conversation if I wanted it, but I also had a book, and it wasn't the internet trying to teach me about the crazy stuff that's even worse. Right. And I was the kid who grew up with the internet. Like I was playing chess on bulletin boards with people where I had a chess and was like, King 2B4, send message. Right. And you have to wait like half an hour for them to post and refresh the page. And so like I had access to the darker, seedier parts of the early internet at a young age. And so I think that balanced it for me. And I'm going to try and do the same thing with my kids. Right. But so like the TV show conversation, just be honest, tell them the truth. If you start making up words or glossing over it, or when two people love each other, like there's a lot of babies that didn't come from love.
It's uncomfortable because you're uncomfortable, not because your child has no context or understanding for why that conversation would be uncomfortable. So it's whatever baggage you carry into it is what you're feeling. Everything else, they're just curious. They want to know why it works the way it does, because that's their job, is to learn.
Well, here's the thing also.
And they're not judging you.
We're talking about, 3 to 6 years of age. At that age, kids, they don't really need a mega detailed explanation. If you're just direct and as simple as possible, that's enough, right? They don't, like you're saying, we don't need the context about like, well, when a man loves a woman, like you don't have to get into that, or the human anatomy, right? Keep it simple. I love when people like Dr. Becky or any sort of like kind of, parenting help creators give us like little loose scripts, right? So if I'm gonna arm you with a script, again, simplicity, mom, dad, where do babies come from? a script, right? Babies grow in a special place called mommy's womb, and when they're ready, they come out into the world. Simple, right? You didn't go into penis and the vagina, no, right? And there's if you're to use analogies to kind of help bring an understanding to the world, make it a little bit easier for them. Just like when a seed grows in a flower, just like when seeds grow into a flower in a garden, babies grow in mommy's belly, right? So, okay, comes from mommy's belly, right? So again, simple, direct. 3 years old, especially when that question emerges, when it comes to like context and all that, I don't think they need to, you need to really rack your brain too much, because they're not racking their brain too much about it either. It's when they start getting a little bit older, 7, 8, 9, 10. Maybe you got to start, but when we're talking, given the audience of the Dad Verb podcast, majority of listeners are guys with kids in that 3 to 6 age range, or younger actually. But yeah, that's kind of our approach there. For the sake of time, let's move on to another one. Okay. Mom, Dad, what happens when you die?
That's like a whole spiritual conversation.
Right. So, okay. I'll lead with this one. And again, just talking about scripts from, I was able to pull from, is this Dr. Becky? No, I don't remember who I pulled this one from, but interesting one to consider. Okay. For younger kids, again, 3 to 6 years of age, when someone dies, their body stops working. They're not here with us anymore. Right. But we can still remember them and talk about the happy times that we had together. It's, and then you want to, address any sort of feelings, right? You want to reassure them that it is natural to feel sad or scared when thinking about death, but it's a part of life. Everyone lives on in our memories and the stories that we share about them, right? And then it gets dicey, because then everyone's going to have different takes with regards to like faith and beliefs or atheism or whatever, right?
Right.
And at that time, you as a parent, you just you make whatever decision you make in that regard. But again, when it comes to the script, the concept of death is that when someone dies, their body stops working. They're not here with us anymore. But we cherish their memories through this and that. Oh, okay. That's what happens after, though. That's again, that's hard, because
there's a difference between what happens when someone dies and what is the afterlife. And we convolute those conversations repeatedly in modern society.
We do. We do. So
maybe this is a better example of answer the literal question. Don't get into the theology of it. Just what happens? Well, their heart stopped beating. You know how you can hear your heart? They're stopped. Right. And now they can't walk. Now they can't. Right. Right.
But this is going to be one of those difficult ones where we probably should just move on to a different one, because then we're going to have, the religious front and all that. Sorry, my camera just died on me. If you're watching on YouTube,
didn't charge the battery.
I died. While I charge the battery here, let me toss you guys. Let me toss you guys a different one.
It was a very precise moment there. Andrew metaphorically died on YouTube.
My video goes dark, right? Okay, let me toss you guys another one as I'm changing this battery. Hey, Mom, Dad, why is that person homeless? How do you approach that one?
You know what? The bluntly honest Andrew wants to say something along the lines of, they made poor choices in their life. Right?
Potentially.
I mean, I will go with, I understand that about a third of the homeless population didn't make poor choices, but the people around them also didn't support them. So I'm going with there were poor choices made at some point in that scenario.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing, right? You explain that, some people either potentially have mental illness or have physical issues, or they ended up that way because of addiction, potentially. There's a lot of different reasons I think that someone could end up homeless, and it's just giving that sort of matter of fact answer, right? There's a lot of different reasons that someone might end up without a home. Usually it has to do with their money or their situation or their family. And this may have been the safest option for them. This may be the only option they had. And, fortunately, Mom and Dad, we work and we're in a stable place, and that's why we don't experience this sort of thing. But But I think at that point too, it's sort of and this goes into like the ethics of it, right? Is like, what do you explain to them that aligns with your moral compass as a family, that says like, I believe that this is why, or this is how, or these are the mechanisms for it. There's sort of the data back piece, and then there's the ethical piece of like, how did they get there and what do we believe in, you know, and all that
how
stuff.
much support are we required to give them?
Yeah, again, I mean, that's all up to you and your family, and that's where you know, having these conversations gets kind of tough, because there is no one right answer other than your kids are more perceptive and understand more than you give them credit for, because they see the world around them. They just don't have an explanation for whatever it is. So just allow them the chance to understand it, and then layer in whatever nuanced viewpoint you have as a family.
Right.
But don't necessarily bring that just into the immediate answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I missed the first part of that. I'm not sure. Saunders,
I said they made poor decisions. Ben went all noble about it, and I'm like, they made bad decisions in life. That's why they're homeless. Moving on. Like, I did not take a politically correct stance at all. But I will say that I spent 4 years working at the University of Utah, and I spoke with a lot of nurses. And one of my buddies, Mike, was actually the homeless outreach coordinator for the city of Salt Lake.
Yeah.
And he said, statistically, the average time of homelessness, which I know is not the proper term now, is less than 2 years. At least in Salt Lake, it was less than 2 years, because the programs were set up to move you out of homelessness and get you back on your feet within 2 years. Or unfortunately, you just deteriorated physically and your health deteriorated so much you can't survive in modern America that way, or at least in Salt Lake City, because it had winters. And so I think the answer is, I think the easy answer is bad decisions, right? And that's the one I took. The hard answer is everybody has a different situation, like Ben said, and sometimes that leads to not having a home.
Yep.
But you can also go with, you don't have to have a roof and four walls to have a home, right? A tent, can be a home if your next step is, I'm going to get an apartment, or your next step is, I'm working on the next piece, or your home can be a car, right? And I get both sides of the coin.
I think if we're talking about scripts, right? I think here we go. And I think it aligns pretty much with
what's
what
the source of this one.
I don't remember. I literally copy and pasted some good things from a bunch of different people. I should have cited it. But quote: sometimes people lose their homes because they don't have enough money, or they might not have a job. Everyone has different reasons for that situation. Yeah, there can be many reasons someone becomes homeless, like losing a job, health issues, not having family to support. It's a tough situation. And there are a lot of different organizations that kind of help people get back on their feet. Maybe they'll find that help, So, again, simple context, a little bit of hope there. Guys, there's so many questions. What is war? Why is that person in a wheelchair? What does sex mean? Why can't I have a tablet yet? Why can't I have a phone yet? Why do I have to eat the vegetables, right? I'm gonna toss you guys one more. It's simpler, but it's actually one that's kind of like, well, what do I say to that? All right. Well, why can't I stay up late as you guys? Because the answer I want to tell them is because we're so damn tired, and mom and dad need to have sex. Like we got to watch our shows. But like that, like, how do you tell a kid, like, what is a real, like, how do you break that down for a 3 to 6 year old? Why can't I stay up as late as you?
I don't think this is going to be an issue in my household yet, or maybe it'll come up eventually, but I think it's very self-explanatory, right? Are you tired? For them. Yes. Then you have to go to sleep. That's what happens when you get tired.
But I'm not tired, Dad.
Well, then stay up. Like, again, my bedtime range is 7:30 to 11 p.m. Okay. I've carved out 4 hours in the evening where I'm like, I acknowledge you're tired. It is now time for you to be in bed. Right. And so I think that question only pops up in the rigid, this is your bedtime, you're going to bed moments. It doesn't pop up in the, oh, when I'm tired, I need to go lay down. Because if you build that in from the beginning, that your kid will just put themselves to bed. Right.
Gotcha.
And I think we've all seen this. You've all had the moment when your toddler at like a year, they've learned how to crawl. And then all of a sudden they crawl over somewhere nice and they're asleep. And you're like, what, why are you asleep? Is everything okay? And it turned out that they were tired and they put themselves to sleep, and you were clueless, or you were like just happy it happened. And so I think that's the natural state. And this idea of you will go to bed at 8 p.m. because I said so is the artificial state that we are attempting to enforce as parents. Right now, I don't have kids in school, so there might be a cranky school thing, but Andrew had 108 late days his senior year of high school, and I still graduated. So the whole getting up for school thing doesn't float with me either. So
Ben, how do you approach the question for your kiddos?
So we have a saying, right? So mom and dad have a job to do. And so both of our kids know this, or at least our 4-year-old, when we talk to him about it, we say, I look at him and he says, I don't want to go to bed, or I'm not tired yet. And I look at him and I say, what is my job? And his response is to keep me safe. Right. And so part of keeping him safe is also keeping him healthy and making sure that he does the things. And this is exactly the way I explained it to him is part of my job of keeping you safe is also keeping you healthy, which means sometimes I have to ask you to do things that you might not want to do, but are best for you. And one of those right now is going to bed, because you're going to get enough sleep so you can have energy tomorrow to play and yada, 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 hang out with your friends, right? But it's all based on this core tenet of when he doesn't want to do something or doesn't understand, why do I need to be buckled into my car seat? Lincoln, what's my job? To keep me safe. Okay, so I do that by keeping you buckled in your car seat and making sure you're properly installed so you don't get hurt. It's the same thing about his nutrition. It's the same thing about his sleep. It's the same thing about all those. So it always goes back to that core idea of keeping him safe and healthy, and trying to teach him those things so that someday he can do that for himself.
I like how Ben found the most complicated way to say, because I said so.
Basically.
Script.
Basically.
like you have a great way of being like, it's because I said so and I'm your dad. Like
I have gotten there on a couple discussions now of like, he starts talking back and I'm like, I told you this because I'm the dad and you're the kid and this is my job. And I know you don't like it, but this is still my job.
Right.
But I'm not going to not do my job because it makes you upset.
You don't have the right to fire me until you hit 18. And then, oh, guess what? When I'm about 75, I'm coming back to live with you. And then we'll have a different firing conversation.
Any listeners out there with any sort of kind of script ideas of their own for certain situations? You know, is that a boy or girl? You know, what's war? All that stuff. Let us know. Curious to see what your takes are on certain things. Is Santa real? I don't know. Curious to see how you've heard other ways to approach hard situations, awkward situations, all that stuff with your littles. 6 and under. Round things
Give
out.
us ones we didn't list, because I want to hear some like difficult conversations that we didn't even broach the subject of.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's some great ones out there, or even some good stories or experiences from actual parents out there who've had it. Right. Big shout out to Huckberry. Dude, Ben, you want to speak to Huckberry real quick? Our sponsors of the Dad Verb podcast.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't heard of Huckberry, I know, before we started working together, I had a sort of passing knowledge of Huckberry. But once they reached out to us, we started looking through their site. They have a ton of brands out there. Everything from your kind of classic outdoor stuff like Patagonia, Faraday, and some other high-end items, to some of their in-house brands. Like right now I'm wearing their, it's the American Heavyweight Pocket Tee by Flint and Tinder, which is one of their in-house brands. Super thick, super comfortable. We've been trying a bunch of their stuff, and we'll have a Dad Verb storefront up pretty soon and an affiliate code for you guys to go check out, support the show, and refresh your closet a little bit, because just because you're a dad and you don't want to take the time to shop doesn't mean you shouldn't have stuff that still looks good. And this is a really easy way to do that without actually having to go to a store.
Loving their stuff. I don't recall
They have
exactly
a
what
bass
I'm
hat,
wearing, but
like
I
Christopher.
will have it all linked for you guys to check out. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you on the next one. Peace.